Knight Rider. KITT is more than a car. It's an extension of you, Michael Knight. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Did they intend for the back of the box to be read like it's a twist? Because that's why I read it like that in the front, like that, revealing that you, the player, are Michael Knight.
I appreciated more the front of the box that just says that you will drive the car from Knight Rider.
Which is the same reason why you would buy anything Knight Rider merchandise, right? Like, forget if it's a video game, like, if it's a toy, you're not buying the Michael Knight action figure, you're buying the Michael Knight action figure that conveniently comes with KITT, the car.
But you don't want a little bit of David Hasselhoff in your life?
Don't hassle the Hoff.
True.
I think it was meant to be a twist, but it feels like they really put that twist in a little early. On the first sentence you read before even opening the box.
Right.
Is the plot twist.
Well, who else are you supposed to be? You?
Right.
You've hijacked
Mach
KITT.
Rider?
Yeah, no one's allowed to be. Yeah, Knight Rider is a little different than Mach Rider. But also, before we get into like the game and stuff, I feel like it's appropriate to talk about Knight Rider, which I knew almost nothing about other than the name of the car and that the car is pretty cool. So I went and watched the first episode of Knight Rider, which is available on Peacock. And, you know, lately I've been confused because with all the networks getting their own streaming services and just adding their name and then a plus in front of it, we're being told that the golden age of television is over. And I think that's funny because it's like golden age of television. Like usually the golden age refers to things like when they first started, you know, like we had the golden age of comics back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the golden age of movies in the 20s and stuff like that. How could we be in the golden age of TV just in the 2000s? But then I went back and watched Knight Rider from the 80s, and this show is just like, man, people were willing to put up with a lot more garbage on primetime television back then.
So you don't like Knight Rider?
Just from what I watched in the first episode, I can't believe it even got renewed.
Wow. I mean, I haven't watched it either. Pretty much the same background as you, where I just sort of know of it. In fact, I actually got Knight Rider and like Quantum Leap confused all the time. But I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it was at least like if you're into that kind of thing, like it's cute and fun.
It's got really low production values, in my opinion, and it's also like this James Bond light going for it, where, you know, James Bond movies in the 80s were already featuring Roger Moore and were pretty damn cheesy. Now imagine if you have like 1/20th of the budget of a James Bond movie and you also have to make a TV show for it.
Yeah, I've never seen it either, but I always imagined it and other similar shows kind of like having that like Batman syndrome where like, oh, people probably loved it at the time, you know, kids liked it or whatever, or people thought it was fun. But now if you look back at it, you're like, wow, this was not well put together.
Joe,
but that's just me assuming. I've never seen it.
I'm glad you brought up Batman because that is something where like the Batman 60s TV show, it's, you know, it's funny. It's not like meant to be taken seriously, but that is one where like the Batmobile was so cool that it still like translates today as if you see that at like a, you know, it comes to Comic-Con near you or something, like people line up and they want to see that. I'm not saying that's not the case for KITT, but the things that make KITT cool are mostly the fact that he talks. You know, otherwise it's like, yeah, sure, he does like, you could shoot bullets and stuff like that and jump in the air and all these other crazy things that only happen like for one particular episode and then are never brought up again or used to effect. But for the most part, it's not about like how cool the car actually looks, whereas like the Batmobile is about the you know, the shape and aesthetic of it. Knight Rider and KITT is more just like, yeah, it's a talking car. Like you won't believe it. The car talks.
I mean, it's a character, I assume, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, it has. But does the car in the show have a gun on it?
The car can do anything it wants to do, but as long as the writers allow it.
Well, right. So it does, but it confirmed that it shoots. Because
it also does every other cartoony gadget thing you can imagine. What I'm saying is the problem is that they use those things and then it's like, oh, we just forgot to use them later again when it would have helped Michael.
Well, you were talking about the most like interesting thing about KITT being that it talks. Like, I know that like it's said that it does that, but like, what kind of character is the car? Because I don't think we really got a good handle of KITT as a character in this game. It's more so like you know the people that look after KITT and like your boss, but KITT himself isn't really a character in this game.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a question I don't want to jump ahead. Even on the character of Michael Knight, too, which was really a strange introduction to him, where it looked like a guy who vaguely looked like David Hasselhoff in the beginning, but in a twist, he gets shot in the face, and they think he's dead, but then they wind up doing some plastic surgery to him, and I don't know why that would help him come back to life, but... They obviously, I'm for fans of the show, I know I'm doing a huge disservice here. He has a metal plate in his head which made the bullet bounce off of it, but his face was damaged forever, and so they gave him plastic surgery. That now he looks like David Hasselhoff, but I'm like, I don't know, he kind of looked like the guy looked like David Hasselhoff before. So now it's just a funny way of being like, he's not himself anymore. Like he's a completely new identity, and it's like it doesn't pay off. So I don't really know. I didn't get a good read on Michael Knight.
That didn't answer anything.
Right.
Like,
I didn't get a good read on Michael Knight,
confused.
and I didn't get a good read on KITT because I can't tell if he's like, like a witty wingman, or if he's like, cooler than Michael, and like,
that's
like
sort
he's
of
the star of the show. I couldn't get that vibe from one.
Yeah, that's sort of more what I'm asking. Whereas, like, at least in the intermission briefings, like you can get an idea that like, oh, okay, this M guy, who I guess is Michael, really likes to take vacations, and he's like, he doesn't always like to go on the missions. Whereas, like, you don't even get an inkling of what the car is like. So yeah.
Gut check here on the Michael and KITT relationship is that Michael is Batman and KITT is Alfred.
Okay.
That was what I was gonna ask though. So like, does like, I mean, does KITT like ever talk back or disagree or anything, or is it like, KITT, activate this, and he's like, yes sir, or is it like character?
Is
there like interaction between them?
Right, it's a character, and he will suggest the things to do. It's like he's like, might I make a suggestion, Michael? Like something like that.
Yeah, okay.
I see.
He doesn't overstep his boundaries. He asks politely to fucking do.
He's
the
very
right thing.
deferential. Okay. Yeah.
And, the one thing that really translates over between the video game and the show is that the show was also all about terrorists and committing treason and shit like that. And the video game sets up the same exact plot of the terrorists have raided a U.S. military site, and only Michael Knight and KITT can chase them all the way across the country. Keep in mind, you go from San Francisco back to L.A., so really an unusual trip.
Yeah.
Right. But, you do that, and I think, traveling across country map makes the driving experience cool. But the whole, like, terrorists and this kind of car thing also made me think about Back to the Future with the DeLorean and the terrorists randomly being inserted into that plot as well.
Well, that was just like an 80s thing where everything was terrorists. But the reason that you have to come back to LA after leaving LA is because there's just so much shit that goes wrong over the course of this game. Like, they have terrible defense and counterintelligence measures between this Knight Foundation and the U.S. government. There's just like, I know we just got you from this other mission where the terrorists stole the weapons, but like, actually, while you were out there, these other terrorists stole this virus from Toronto. While you're on your way, can you go stop them? Like, oh no, now something's going on in Miami. Like, everything. It's pretty. Is that maybe that's how the show is too, where we just have inept counterintelligence measures all over the place.
Yeah, but I mean, it's got to be hard to deal with it when there's just across the entire country, there are just like caravans of terrorists on like residential streets, or not residential streets, but like public streets.
Yeah, it's a pretty high ratio.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Sean, you're talking about the various missions they'll give you, but what did you think about that? just from a presentation standpoint, the way that they brief the missions to you and then they bring you over to the, I don't know the woman's name, but she's like the tech person and she helps you select like which stat you want to boost and stuff like that. What did you think of the presentation of those elements of the game?
I like that. I like that it sort of gives you. I know it's not really a home base that you actually are in, but after each mission, you have a sort of a breather, and you get half of a joke from these people, and you like it doesn't really matter how you performed, you get an upgrade, and I think that even though what's happening in the game has really nothing to do with what's going on with these terrorists or whatever other plot stuff is going on. I think that this does a relatively okay job at telling a story within the game itself, as long as it's not just in the manual. This is a step above the normal stuff that we get throughout the course of this podcast. And even though you can upgrade many different things, I learned that I can't control this game well enough to want to go faster. So I mostly just went into like shield and gas.
Yeah, that story, those story elements do, the context there does kind of help in a weird way, like keeping me interested in each mission, because without that, the only thing that's changing mission to mission, besides like maybe the number of enemies on screen, is the background, which is another thing that helps. But like, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you strip those things away, the story and the background, it's a very, very, very repetitive game, and it's remarkable to me how far just like little story beats like that go in making it feel a little like unique each time.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Joe, that this is just good branding for Knight Rider, because these are the elements that make it feel closest that you're playing Knight Rider and not just as any car and as any guy driving on highways that don't really, to Sean's point, like the terrorist plot, you don't really feel it in the moment-to-moment gameplay. You're mostly just dodging blue cars and shooting red and yellow cars on your way between cities. So this element of both the briefing mission, which kind of shows you your map and has dialogue between Devon and Michael and KITT, that's good in itself, because that kind of like sets up, oh, it's the next episode of Knight Rider, right? And then you have with Bonnie, where they have like the schematics of the car that don't mean anything. Like you can't even shift over to them or look at them or anything, but I could imagine
but it looks super cool.
Right, yeah, a kid having a lot more fun with his imagination, thinking about like, oh, I've upgraded the shields and like, what does that mean for the car? Like, like based on the blueprints. Like, I could see that being a lot of fun. So when you look at games that we've played in the past, like Back to the Future or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, those were games that we felt, like they were covering the story beats and everything, but they felt a little soulless against the IPs that they were actually replicating in video game form. Whereas this one, I think, does a pretty good job of at least, inserting the correct characters and having like their, personalities in the dialogue and including a little extra flavor in these two screens that, yeah, it's like whatever at the end of the day, right? You can just press the start button on either of these and just to skip over them. But if you want them, they're there to add flavor.
Yeah. I'd say that this game has a little easier off, though, because it's about driving a car fast against terrorists, whereas Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a little bit harder of a concept to gamify. But no, I definitely believe that even with that handicap, this game did a much better job.
And then you're brought into the actual gameplay where you're in the cockpit view of KITT as you're driving on these highways, and it kind of auto starts for you and then, lets you take the wheel and you're on your own from there. Before we talk about, gameplay or anything, I really just want to talk about this user interface that they've laid out here for KITT's cockpit, because this is the thing that, I guess like makes both the coolness of the car translate into video game form, but also just does things that I wasn't aware we could do. on the NES. When you start thinking about like all the other ideas we come up for other games, this thing has a lot of features jam packed into a UI, and yeah, it's taking up like at least a third of the screen. But it has it has a timer, it has your score, it has your shield HP measure. KITT's voice has like he can talk to you to warn you about things, and that's indicated as well. The speedometer and the tachometer, I think you say, the fuel gauge for gas, a radar that shows you like where other enemies are on the screen as they're approaching. So if you're either in the air and need to think about like where you want to land, or if a turn is coming up, it'll tell you about these things. And also like what weapons you have indicated and how far away you are from the next location. Like that is just so much information on one cockpit view that actually all works.
Yeah, the mini map is something that I thought was, in terms of the HUD, the most impressive part, and actually like kind of the most useful part. If you're spending a lot of time turboing and not exactly seeing the ground, it could do a lot of help to just knowing where you are in relation to all the other enemies or obstacles. And the speedometer looks cool too, but in general, this game just looks really good. Like even going past the dashboard, just looking at the road ahead of you, like it's very smooth considering there's a lot of different like angles that it's doing, and the sprites for the vehicles, like if it's a truck, you'll get several different versions of the view, like how it would look if you're looking at a truck from behind, like third quarter perspective. It just looks good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the game looks great, and that translates it to it feeling great too, because the way the motion looks also kind of makes it feel good. As far as the HUD or the dashboard and everything, I did feel like I was really impressed with how much they put on there. I guess I was a little less impressed with the practicality of the mini map. I thought it was impressive, but and I hadn't really thought about like how useful it is when you're jumping in the air, but I guess I did that so infrequently. It felt almost useless to me when I'm on the ground, because everything you can see on the screen is everything you can see on your mini map is already on your regular screen at that point. Like it doesn't show you further out than your actual sight. There's no reason for me to ever look. It felt like there was no reason for me to ever look at the mini map when I can just look at the screen. I guess for not counting the fact that like when you jump, you might need to check that because you can't see the road anymore.
But Joe, I think it'll tell you if turns are coming before you could anticipate them, which is important because you need to slow down, right?
I mean, I'm watching right now, and I think I can see the turns like in the distance at the same time as the.
Maybe I was
up.
just so focused on the radar in general that I was just using it as a my actual rather than looking out.
Yeah, so you're playing this like a modern video game.
Right.
You just stare at the mini-map the whole time.
Also doesn't help, though, that the radar... and look, it's already advanced enough, so I'm not going to put a big complaint in here. But if the blue cars are supposed to represent, like, civilians that you're just not supposed to damage, and if you do blow them up, you are just given, like, a 5-second penalty. Feels like it should be a lot more severe for killing innocent civilians, but whatever. When terrorists are on the loose, I guess you get to do whatever you want. Here's the thing. They show up on the radar as well. So, yeah, I guess it really is only used for jumping because it's not an accurate thing to detect where your enemies are. It just shows anything that's on the map, on the highway with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a think piece on why the human operator needs to be a part of warfare. Because to an AI, all humans are enemies.
It is reading those blue cars like enemies, no doubt.
That's a good point. But the other reason that the fact that the minimap didn't give me as much use, like the reason that stands out to me so much is because I felt like it was kind of the one major thing really missing from the game that would make a big difference in the gameplay. And not to jump too much into the gameplay, but I'm sure we'll talk a little later about, and we already talked a little bit about like the the kind of resource management of it. You got to kind of manage your fuel, and you got to look at like how much time you have left, and before you get to the finish line or whatever you want to call it. But nowhere on this display is there an indication of how close you are to the end of this level.
There is, Joe.
Feels there is.
Yes, but no, that's okay. There's no reason you should know that. But if you look at the manual, it does have that. So you see that red square that's kind of like between the screens where your gas meter is and where your weapons are.
Isn't
below
that
it?
like KITT's head? Like that's KITT's face, right?
No. Sorry. So that's like his voice modulation thing.
You're talking about like the cross.
Not the cross. So just the little red square that's between the gas meter and the weapons.
Okay. Yeah.
So that is the distance meter,
well,
and so
then,
that is
that's
how
what I
far
needed.
away you are from the goal.
That's what I needed, because this whole time I was like, well, I'm just going to really try and conserve gas the whole time because I have no idea how close I am and how. So that changes things for me.
There's a lot of like between this game and Ghostbusters, like you can really tell that the people who made this game are children of the gas crises of the 70s, because just conserving gasoline is a huge theme in these NES games.
Well, I assume that was one of the most exciting parts of the show, is like when he's like, oh shit, I'm almost out of gas.
That's what I was gonna say. Is KITT really a supercar if he needs gas? Like they couldn't have made him just electric just for the sake of futurism as well?
Nuclear fuel cells.
Anything, right? I guess look, that comes down to a lot of things too. There's just the vulnerability of KITT on so many levels. One that, he has that gas, right? But then also the shields, and just the amount of time it takes him once he goes off-road and like hits a tree or something, the amount of time it takes him to get back on the highway. Granted, it's incredible that he could continue driving at all, but still, as a supercar and stuff like that, I feel like the coolest parts of the car were in the HUD, and the car becomes a lot less impressive when you see what you can actually do with it in the moment-to-moment gameplay.
Yeah, I want to now kind of like rethink what I was saying about the HUD, and I actually think that them putting everything, including that like distance meter, the map, all your stuff, just to like sum up everything we're talking about, putting all of that in the dashboard of the car does a great job of making you feel like the car is quote unquote a character or like a main part of this game. It doesn't just feel like this is all video game information. It feels like you are working with the car, like you're using the car to make decisions and to, like it's just immersive in that sense, where it's like it's not just a map up in the top corner of your screen or something. It all feels like, oh, I'm able to do this because this car is so cool.
But do you know what I'm saying, Joe? You were talking about how later, we do this thing where we always say, like, I'm sure later on we'll talk about it, and then we just go right into it.
Right.
The resource management part of this game makes KITT a lot less cool immediately. Like,
I agree.
The presentation thing is great, and then you realize, like, oh, but the actual car isn't, like, that great. And trust me, it's not, because you don't have all the upgrades. That stuff is not going to improve as you, like, continue to upgrade your shields. That's just what happens.
I don't know. I think the car is still pretty cool. I think the thing that makes it uncool is that they tied your turbo boost to just something as mundane as how full your gas tank is. Like, if they just made it like, oh, you got like 3 or 4 turbocharges and that's just it. It's like a discrete number of times that you can use this feature, and like you don't have to worry about gas your KITT. And you're not just gonna like slow down and die on the highway. I think it would do the exact same thing in balancing the gameplay, because you'd still have a limited amount of times that you could do the super jump, and it would still be cool because you're not thinking about gas. So I think that one little design change could make this feel a little bit cooler.
Yeah, I think that the thinking about gas part like does definitely like takes away from like the cool factor that you're feeling, because it's like that's such a like mundane regular thing to think about, and it's like a little bit of a chore to have to manage your gas just from like driving quickly. Your gas goes down like, but I do get the idea behind like if that worked, if the gas thing did work, I get the idea behind tying your turbo boost to the gas, because then it makes it just feel all a little more connected.
Yeah, it's
like it's all part of the car. But
Yeah,
the problem is that it just doesn't work in general.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's like, oh, you would have to think about gas because you're driving a car, but no, you're driving KITT, which from what we believe is a cool thing from the 80s. We may not know firsthand, but that's what we're going by.
I never thought of the turbo thing as a, as the thing that was using up my gas. Now it's so clear, and I did read the manual, and it does mention that that's part of his turbo boost or whatever. But I just thought that was like a jump ability that the car had. Like the car just had this amazing, impressive ability to just jump in the air. But I guess it's just that the turbo leaps it into the air or whatever. Doesn't make too much more sense.
Would they give you not enough gas to complete a level? Like that would be
it's true
something
because
else.
I was spamming it my first playthrough, just thinking like, oh wow, this is great. I can just hop over all the blue cars, don't even have to worry about that. And I ran out of gas very quickly. So yeah, to your point, Sean, if you just limited the amount of times you could jump to like 3, right? Like think about it. They're limiting how many missiles you have, how many lasers you have. Why not just limit these jumps or turbo boosts as they're supposed to be called? Limit those as well and lose this feature, because there's just a lot of different like failure states, right? There's the failure of time, the failure of gas, the failure of your shields. Like there's 3 ways to lose, and you're supposed to be the coolest car on the planet.
Yeah, and also, I mean, was I imagining this, or does going faster, realistically guzzle your gas more quickly? Yeah, because there were times where I didn't jump at all, and I still didn't make it with enough gas. And then I realized, am I really supposed to be like strategically managing like my speed throughout too?
Wow, that's just unrealistic.
It felt like it felt that like it was like giving me this tool to go super fast, but then like that was like really cool, but then making me feel like, well, I shouldn't really ever do that.
Yeah, I don't know why they would do it this way, because going fast should be a self-limiting thing. Like, if you're skillful at driving fast and you can find a way around your obstacles, then you should be allowed to do that with no other, like, malice. Because, like, otherwise you're being punished twice. Like, you have more of a chance to run into shit, and also your gas is just going to drain faster. That seemed... I didn't notice that at all, but that seems silly.
Yeah, I noticed it. It made me, like, reluctant to go top speed, which seems like would be the most fun part about this game. It reminds me of, if we go all the way back to a very, very old episode from an alternate reality, it reminds me of when we talked about Sonic the Hedgehog, where I was like, well, the first level encourages you to go really fast, and then every level since then feels like it punishes you for going fast.
Yeah, it'd be crazy if we ever recovered that game.
Yeah, I'm saying if we had recorded
if we had recorded that, I'm sure we would have
said
said something along those lines.
Yeah.
And another thing about the whole driving... as a compliment, because I feel like maybe we're ragging on a little too hard. We said that the UI was cool, and then we started busting KITT. Now we're gonna talk about good KITT things again. So I thought that the use of the controller in this game and how they made every button count was really impressive. It was a little like hard to, like, as I'm driving and controlling my speeds, because you have to hold up on the D-pad to continue to accelerate faster. It was a little hard to, like, also press select on that kind of controller. Like, it's not as, it's just not as fluid as I'm used to with, like, an Xbox 360 controller or whatever. But it all worked because they made every button count. So the B, A, select all do things, and they all do things other than accelerate. Like, it would suck if they made the A button the acceleration button, and you just always have to, like, hold that down, and then the B is your firing thing, and then the select button winds up being jump or something. So I like that they tied all steering and speed between the D-pad, so left and right to steer and up and down to kind of control your speed. And then the B button is your jump, the A is your weapons, and the select cycles between the weapons. I don't know, I just found that to be a really impressive use of using every single button that's on the controller. There's really not much else they could have done.
Yeah, I mean, it's refreshing compared to some games where I feel like even if they are using all the buttons, they're using them in weird ways. And it does feel, I will say at first it felt weird to me to use the up on the D-pad to accelerate. Like, I wanted to use A, but yeah, as I kind of went on and was like thinking about the limitation, the limited amount of buttons on an NES controller, it does make the most sense because it's all intuitive. Then it's like you can turn while holding up because you can kind of you can kind of roll your thumb over to the left side as you're still accelerating and whatnot. But then you can also like you can shoot with your other hand or jump and whatnot.
Yeah, and just going off of like the controls of it, that the game in terms of its sense of speed, aside from there not being too many like foreground objects to sort of to illustrate that, it does have a good sense of speed and like handling of this vehicle. Like it doesn't like if the controls allowed for acceleration and braking to be their own face buttons, it might feel even better because like in a more modern game, there'd be like this sort of balance between uh, laying on the gas and braking and sort of alternating between that. But there's like a version of that with what's going on here because if you take a turn, go like just screaming down the road, you're gonna have to like kind of modulate a little bit to make sure that you don't run yourself off the road. And there were some like nail biting moments when I was just at the actual shoulder of the street and trying to make sure that I didn't go into a car or into a an obstacle on the grass. The game feels good in terms of the actual acceleration car stuff.
Yeah, it reminded me of another famous NES Rider game, Mach Rider, in that sense, where you do have to be aware of the turns and figure out the course in that kind of way, because otherwise you will spin out and it'd be impossible to brake in time or slow down in time because you're at top speed or whatever, and you weren't anticipating a hard left or hard right.
Yeah, and like the sounds, they're not the best sound design of like a screeching tire, but they apply some good feedback when like, oh, I need to slow down.
Now, let's not forget the mission of the game, though, and that was to chase down these terrorists and, get between the destinations of the city. Along the way, you are, you run into these red and yellow cars. The red cars are, they'll shoot it back at you, and the yellow cars are just this. They basically act like red cars, except for you will know that they'll have a power up or something that they'll hand off to you if you manage to blow one of them up. There's a couple thoughts here from me. One is that the whole like red, yellow, blue color scheme isn't like hard to decipher. This isn't like a zapper game where you're like, oh, I got to make sure I don't shoot the civilian, right? In this, it's very obvious. Like blue stands out like a lot against the red and yellow, so it was never hard to dodge those guys. You'd have to really either ram into them because you have nowhere else to go, or accidentally like misfire without a because of the way that the cars are shooting at you. You have to kind of weave between traffic and accidentally doing it that way. So I didn't find it. The blue were just more like an obstacle in my way rather than something that I might accidentally destroy. But also the red cars and just the way they behave, and I don't know if it's all cars in the game, but they shoot like one or two at a time, and then once they've done that, you just kind of have to come into the lane and shoot and then swerve back out. And I know that sounds either easy or frustrating or whatever. I guess for me it landed on frustrating because you have to also keep about your speed. And if you're not paying attention to how fast you're going and also focusing on, okay, well, these guys stopped shooting, so now I'm going to weave in and shoot at them. And, oh, wait, it's not just one bullet's going to take care of them. It's going to be a few hits. It winds up being something where I wind up passing a lot of these guys, or I wind up having to just move on from them and focus on the road. And so because the objective isn't taking down X number of terrorists before you move on and more about getting to the destination, there's not much incentive to play most of the course.
Yeah, I noticed that. I wasn't skipping them like on intent. I wasn't skipping them intentionally, but I wasn't really worried if I missed them. But I thought that they were easy enough to sort of track, where I would just match their speed and sort of ride the line between them and the next lane, so that my bullets could hit, but like theirs missed most of the time. That I would still engage, but if I was going too fast, or if the actual lay of the land didn't allow for a safe, like from whatever term that you're going for, a safe engagement, then I had no problem just driving past them.
Yeah, I kind of, whenever I saw any car that was going to shoot at me, I didn't really go out of my way to shoot them first. I was like, well, if I'm over here, I'm just going to drive past them. And then if I happen to see a moment where, like, if I'm shooting at someone else and I see this car shoot and miss, I would take that opportunity to kind of like zip over there real fast and shoot while I know there's like a little bit of cooldown before their next shot. But I certainly didn't go out of the way to put myself in that danger. Like, I was pretty quick to adopt the strategy of, like, if I don't have to shoot at this guy, I'm not going to put myself behind him.
And I suppose to the developers, it made more sense to be a race against time that would be more thrilling, nail biting, if you will, to, make sure you get to the next location in 2.5 minutes or else, versus make sure you defeat 15 red cars, and then the following level, make sure you defeat 17 red cars, like just upping that number. I suppose that's more exciting. Of course, they could have went the complete chaos route and just decided, first destroy 7 cars, and then you'll be able to go to the next city. Like you have to do both X amount of reds, and then you can drive on to the city and try to beat it in time, which would probably be way too frustrating.
Yeah,
but
I think adding 2 different things that you're being constrained by might be more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, it would get frustrating. And for the record, I mean, I didn't feel like my way of playing made it less fun. I felt like it just made it like feel a little more realistic. It was like, hey, I'm trying to get here. Instead of attacking, I'm dodging, but I'll attack if I have to. Like, it never felt like I was like, oh, the game lets me cheese it.
Yeah,
I don't felt like, no, this is like another, way to avoid these things.
I don't disagree with where they wound up. I think that's what I was saying at the end, is that you have to kind of choose like which one's more thrilling to the player, the race against time or defeat 15 enemies. And to be honest, isn't it always the case, even in, say beat 'em ups, right? Other than the ones that I guess like lock you on the particular screen until you clear them all off. For the most part, it's about getting to the end of the level in games, not about like, make sure you take care of everybody. Like, don't let any enemies get through, because then they'll probably get to the you're going to the bad guy's castle, so aren't all the enemies heading to the good people's castle? So you really shouldn't let anybody through, I suppose. But that's a problem for the Toads, not for Mario.
Yeah, that's a completionist achievement perspective.
There should be an achievement for killing every single enemy in a game.
Like just in any game? Like most
Every game should just have that achievement. You've killed everybody.
I didn't know what to say there.
And why should you? Well, what do you want to say about drive mode? That's the other mode in this game that is the same exact locations, the same highway system, and an amount of time it takes to get there and everything. Except for now, it's not about shooting and taking down enemies and everything. Now it's about driving that same course and practicing your driving skills.
Now, I didn't play this. I didn't play the drive mode. I read about it in the manual. But I can see why one would want to, because I know it's really just like a color scheme flip and a background like change out. But each, like just with those being the only 2 things that are changing, each level does have a different feel to it. Like some of them are at night, some of them are in the clear blue sky, some of them are in weird, like, I guess Boston like was recently smoke bombed and it's just everything is like this ghastly purple. But each level does have its own different feel, and in some levels I think the traffic even behaves differently. Like I noticed in later levels, even the obstacle civilians were starting to like change lanes and swerve in front of me, which I thought was cool. It felt more reactive. So I think if you're really just going for that sort of thing and you want to experience the later cities like Miami or like maybe it was Dallas, I don't know, the southern ones, but the actual game is too hard, then this is how you'd experience it.
Yeah, I think we mentioned before, like where this game, I think like one of the bright points of this game is how it drives, how it controls. You know, it's smooth and it feels a little bit ahead of its time in the sense of like a driving game that, you know, a lot of times when we see any sort of game that tries to do something in first person and it feels kind of funky, or it feels like, oh yeah, this was definitely made for the NES, and it's kind of choppier and a little lot stiffer. And this moves smoothly, and it kind of, you know, I can't imagine them improving on the motion too much from where they already are. So like that kind of just gives you a chance to just experience that, and that's fun in its own right.
I only just question the drive mode's, objective being too similar to the base game. I suppose I'm saying it's basically just stripping out the weapons portion, and it's still about getting to the location in X amount of time, and you still have gas and everything. Like in that sense, you know, that I feel like the drive mode should either just be like completely casual and just remove everything and just be more about driving as KITT, right? Or just trying to do something different, like, you know, not style points or something, but something that scores you based on how you drove as KITT in that level, and not just like make sure you get there in the same amount of time.
Yeah, maybe the courses should be more swervy or challenging or something. And I agree with that. Like it should be more like, if it's about driving, then you should introduce something that makes the driving more interesting or more challenging than the regular game.
I guess like my only defense of it is that you really wouldn't have to worry too much about gas, because you're not doing like evasive maneuvers, and you're not going to be jumping unless you want to. And I guess the time limit's not really necessary anymore. But like when you're removing all of the enemies, I think that it's a relax mode as much as it needs to be.
Well, you remove the enemies, but the cars are still there, right? You
still have to navigate traffic
and jump over them and whatnot.
Yeah, you're not going to get hit by any of them unless you run into them. And
but I guess that's the case in the regular game too. Except the only difference is now you have one less way of dealing with them, which is you can't shoot them.
You're going to shoot the civilians?
Well, no, there are still trucks and white and red cars, or at least white cars in the drive mode. Whereas like in the regular mode, it seems like there's the same amount of cars, but the difference is half of them you can shoot. This is like the same thing, but now you can't shoot any of them. You have to dodge all of them. So it almost feels like it would make me more likely to use my turbo jump.
Gotcha.
Granted, I also did not play this mode, so just speculating based on
speculation on both ends then.
Yes. I did play it, and that's, I guess, why I'm just feeling that it wasn't different enough. I definitely agree with you, Joe, that even if they just changed up it doesn't have to be new backgrounds or anything, but just changing up the tracks themselves. But, I guess I'm asking for a lot. The mission mode is the core of the game, and the drive is just something extra. Where's my, pass my international A driver's license test with KITT? That's what I really want to do. It's a Gran Turismo reference.
Yeah.
Why am I picking up other people from the Knight Rider series or from the spin-off show Team Knight Rider? Why are I not picking up these people and taking them around town?
That's what I want. I want a taxi driver game. Do we get one of those, Mike?
Hit and run.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We didn't talk about the boss battles.
Oh yeah.
They're not really boss battles is weird. They're more like just one-off enemies that are more intimidating. So bosses, yeah, sure, why not? Like there's a helicopter, there's a truck, there's a couple of other guys. I don't know, nothing special, right?
Yeah, I mean, you just shoot at them as they drive. You shoot at them as they drive closer and further away from you. They shoot at you a little more. They take a lot more hits.
Yeah, basically throughout a level, you'll have the chance of running into like a friendly. which is like a truck that if you just stay behind it, it'll give you a power up, and it'll give you like missiles sometimes or lasers sometimes like something less fun. And in the kitted, like in the pre-game where you can choose your upgrades, you can choose to pick up missiles and lasers. This is just preface to say that in the boss battles, this is where you just spam all those missiles and lasers so that it's as short as possible.
And you guys wouldn't know because you've never seen the show, but the game doesn't include the theme song.
So the one song in the game is not the theme song?
It's not the theme song. I don't even think that's from the game. From the show, I should say.
Is the theme song iconic? Like, does everybody love it? Okay.
I wouldn't say, like, everybody loves it, but people who, it had a cool show. I would say, in general, this game is missing the kind of Outrun aesthetic that the show might have been a little bit, not as Outrun as things are now in, certain subreddits where it's like everything is all like future retro and stuff like that.
Purple
right. Yeah. This wasn't exactly that. And I would argue that maybe the Las Vegas stage does feel a little Outrun-y, but, the show had a quality about it, especially in the theme song. And that's what made me think about it. That was kind of like, missions at night, dangerous terrorists, like guy wearing sunglasses, even though it's dark outside. Like anything can happen, like that wasn't really embraced in these broad daylight, I'm heading off to Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah, they should have been thinking about us playing this 30-something years into the future when we fetishize that whole thing.
But weren't they fetishizing it back then? Like when it was
I
actually
think that
relevant?
was just I think that was just the way things looked. Like,
got it. Okay, well then in that case though, if that's the way things looked,
like stylized, like that was just the way that we were designing things.
Right, but then why didn't they design the game like that too?
Because it's 8-bit, man.
There you
I
go.
don't know.
Hey.
Yeah.
Well, Outrun kind of gets that name is from the game,
From
right?
the game, I know.
Yeah.
But...
No, I know. That's just funny in general too. That it's not really a style that the TV show would have been going for.
But even Outrun itself isn't, like, if we're going to get into this conversation, even Outrun the game itself isn't holding fast to all of the rules of the subgenre with the digital sun and all that stuff. So I'm going to hold my tongue, though.
I understand. And there's no reason to get into that because I have a question instead.
Okay.
Would you like this game more if you could get out of the car and play as Michael Knight, being like inside of like a hostage situation or trying to run through a terrorist warehouse or something?
No.
I think that could fall into the trap of trying to do too much and then not doing enough with the thing that it should shine at, which is the driving element of it.
We've played many games that try to go cross genre, and I think only one or two were any good.
Well, surprise, it's the sequels and spin-off section.
Oh.
Knight Rider 1984, the original game, the game that came before this one, it was a computer game, was mostly the same exact KITT portions. It looked pretty close to what we see here on the NES, but also let you get out of the car and play as Knight. And I thought that was interesting that a game that came before it, granted for computers, wound up being, maybe considered a little more advanced. Because people were comparing things up against back in those days, right? Is what a game let you do.
Yeah.
So Knight Rider's first game let you do that. Knight Rider on NES does not. And then Knight Rider Special, which was a 1989 Japanese-only game for the TurboGrafx 16. So I guess Knight Rider was pretty damn popular in Japan. Speaking of which, too, I think that the Famicom version of this game changed only one small thing. It changed Bonnie's name to Vonnie with a V.
Vonnie.
As if that's got to be just an accident, right? There's no reason.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that, right?
I don't know.
Oh, wait, another big change in the Famicom version. Sorry, I know I was about to talk about the TurboGrafx 16 thing, but this is a big update. The title screen's different. It's purple instead of blue, so, kind of Outrun vibes. And and they removed Michael up against the car.
So it's just the car.
It's
they
just
don't
the car.
like Hasselhoff there. They're the anti-Germany.
Yeah. I'm sure he felt very hassled by that.
It's kind of like Back to the Future with no Doc. There's two major elements to your show, and you just include one.
Right. So anyway, back to the TurboGrafx 16 game. That is, again, almost the same game as the NES with the idea of just driving between cities and stuff. Except for now, they said, screw the cockpit view. Let's do third-person perspective.
Like, you're behind the car?
Yeah, you're behind the entire car. Kind of like a Gran Turismo kind of view.
I mean, like, that's been done. I mean, so has the first-person thing, but I think just looking at the ass of KITT is less cool than driving KITT.
I never thought of it that I was looking at his ass, but you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could pull up an image of Knight Rider Special for you two to just react to. But it's just great pixel work, but otherwise it's nothing crazy. And I agree. I think that the cockpit view is better.
I agree too. I guess if I wanted to play devil's advocate, I mean, maybe they want people to be able to to see the car, because it's like it's a cool design car. It's like when you create a character in Skyrim and then you play the next 80 hours of the game never looking at the character you created. So I guess I get that side of it, but I do agree that I think that it's just cooler to feel like you're behind the wheel.
I will say though that most modern third person games with this whole over the shoulder thing, less so than in older side scrollers, you're really only looking at the back of a character's head most of the time.
Sure.
Yeah. And then there are 2 PlayStation 2 Knight Rider games, which is also just crazy to me. This one I did send you guys screenshots over to. They look just exactly like you'd expect them to. Obviously, they're more open than any of these games, but it looks like you're stuck in the car this time. So really, it's
is that
funny
the plot point?
That's funny. I think it's interesting that the only Knight Rider game where you got out of the car and played as Michael, David Hasselhoff, was the very first game, and they were like, oh, people hated that. People just want to be the car. And we'll find out if being the car is enough when we decide if this game is on the Essential Games list. Sean, is it enough to be the car?
To drive the car, to be I think you are driving the car. You do.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're definitely not KITT. You're not cool.
You're
enough
not
to be
KITT. But is it enough to drive KITT? I do really like this game. I do think that the visuals are excellent for this sort of thing. The gameplay loop is, while it's not super complex, it is still fun. And the intermission breaks with the map and the conversations, they're cool. And you got your little list of cities, going to all these cities. A lot of the presentational stuff is on point here. I will say though that it just doesn't have the it factor that for me makes it an essential game. I think that it's got a lot of good stuff going for it, but it's just not quite essential.
All right, Joe?
Yeah, this was a lot better than I ever expected it to be. I'll say that for sure. I agree with Sean that the presentation is phenomenal. Also, I guess maybe it's just been a while since we played a game like this, but I was really, impressed with how well it controls. So I thought that was really cool, but ultimately there's really not enough variety. I mean, there's a lot of variety in the imagery and some of the enemies, I guess, but overall the gameplay loop feels so much like a loop. It feels very repetitive to me, that I lose interest pretty quickly. I think this is a fun game to pick up and play for a little bit, but not enough to kind of hold me. So I'm going to not vote it essential.
I also had a lot of fun with this game, and I think it actually had a better time playing this game than I did watching the show it's based off of. So that, it's held up better than its own TV show. That's a pretty good statement. I think Joe was trying to talk about this earlier in the episode about just how smooth the gameplay is too, though. Like, it doesn't feel choppy when you're driving, and I don't know if it's just the way they lock the background and not the highway, but I don't know. I just felt like the driving experience was way better than I was giving it credit for throughout the episodes. I just want to right that wrong if anybody thought that I didn't think that was impressive. But the other elements of the game are what make it less than. I kind of wonder what makes KITT so cool again, and not compared to his character on the show or, personality or just those kinds of things, but compared to other video game cars. Like, I don't know, it feels like every video game car could also just be secretly KITT, because he has the same vulnerabilities and the same kinds of things that we've seen in other video games. And so while his HUD was really cool and, the presentation was top notch, I just didn't feel like, playing as Michael and KITT was the definitive experience of a Knight Rider game. And so it loses a little points there for me too. So not essential. You two already decided that. I'm just jumping in as well. But we got another chance for a different intellectual property to be on the essential games list next week with RoboCop. So it seems like everybody's just licensing everything they can get their hands on now as we kind of end out 1989. And who knows, because 1990 has so many more games than we've ever covered before. Maybe it's all just IPs and giant franchises and sequels of games, and we're gonna think that, will we ever see an original again?
Are you intentionally giving us a taste of things to come right now, Mike?
I think it's more to do with the fact that we're thinking about that now in 2022, where we're like, oh yeah, everything's a sequel, everything is a reboot. We'll never, original movies can't be made anymore. And, now I'm kind of having the same thought in 1989.
Yeah, maybe that's always what it feels like.
Yeah, everything's based off of the success of something, right? Everything's based off the Odyssey, right, Sean?
That was the first and only story ever told.
It would be ridiculous if anyone on this podcast ever read that book.
It would be absolutely
not for school.
Insane.
Also, we have a Nostalgia Bites episode coming up, Star Luster. If that's not something that you lust for, don't worry, because we have 9 other episodes of Nostalgia Bites that are available for you right now. This is not a drill. 9 ready-to-go episodes. Did you hear that, folks? That is the woo telling you that there are 9 episodes of another nostalgia show that you haven't heard about available right this minute. First off, I'm going to question, how haven't you heard about them? Because I've been plugging them at the end of all these shows. So if you've not been listening to the end of the shows, you should know that at the end of the show, we reveal some, pretty crucial information like credit card numbers
really
and
sick
social
shit,
security
yeah.
numbers. Yeah. Locations of America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, from now on, we're actually putting 30 minutes to an hour of dead space at the end of the episode, so no one will be able to tell when the episode actually ends. It'll just end abruptly.
Yeah. And I've been doing that so this way I also make the file sizes bigger. So this way it's like a commitment that you make with the podcast where you accept the amount of space that we take up on your phone.